Hello there, and welcome to the Sleepless Scientist, a quiet place in the cosmos where your thoughts can unwind and knowledge becomes a soft lullaby for the night. Tonight's journey will take us somewhere between science and story, where the edges of reality begin to shimmer a little. We're exploring the haunting possibility that parallel universes might already be brushing against our own, not as far-off theories, but as quiet ripples hidden in the fabric of ordinary life. But before we begin, I'd love if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly find these gentle explorations enjoyable. And when you're ready, leave a comment to let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It's always wonderful to imagine all the small pockets of calm we share across this turning planet, each of us wrapped in the same deep night. Now, take a slow breath, maybe dim the lights, let the hum of the world fade to a soft background whisper. Our story opens in a field of golden grass. The air is still. Somewhere in Tennessee, in the late summer of 1880, a man named David Lang walked across his land to greet a visitor approaching by horse and carriage. It was an afternoon so ordinary it should have dissolved into history without a trace. But instead, in front of his wife, his children, and two neighbours, David Lang simply vanished. Not behind a tree, not into a sinkhole. One step, and he was gone. His family ran toward the spot where he had stood. The earth was solid beneath their feet. No hole, no sign of struggle. For days, neighbours joined the search, combing through fields and creeks. They found nothing. Only the grass where he disappeared began to change, first yellow, then brittle, refusing to grow back for years, as if something had scorched it from within. Months later, his daughter, still wandering that same field, swore she heard her father's voice calling faintly from below the ground. She ran for her mother, but when they returned, there was only silence. The voice never came again. Whether the story is fact or folklore, no one can say for sure. It was printed in newspapers, the names and dates recorded, as if to prove that even the impossible deserves a witness. And perhaps that's the real reason we still tell it. Not to prove, but to remember the feeling of standing at the edge of what we think is real, listening for something that calls back. In our world, vanishing acts often leave traces: an overturned boat, a missing footprint, a map drawn wrong. But sometimes, it's as though the air itself swallows a person whole. Science might say that's impossible, that matter can't simply disappear, and yet, physics quietly reminds us that matter and energy can transform, dissolve into invisible states, and even reappear elsewhere. It's not magic. It's motion at its smallest scale, a rhythm the eye can't follow. If we translate it softly, the universe behaves like an ocean with countless waves overlapping. You and I see only the crest of one, the bright, solid world we live in. But beneath it, other waves roll quietly, carrying their own versions of events. In those hidden swells, perhaps David Lang kept walking, never realising he'd slipped beneath a different sky. There's a principle in quantum theory that hints at such things, but not in the way most stories tell it. It says that the smallest particles of reality don't choose a single path until someone or something observes them. Before that moment, they're not here or there, but both. Imagine tossing a coin that never lands, forever turning through every possible outcome. Our everyday world is the one version where the coin happened to fall heads up, but the tail still exists somewhere, still spinning, still real. It's a strange thought, but not an impossible one. Physicists have described it as the universe branching quietly every instant, each choice or chance unfolding a slightly different world. You take a left turn instead of right, and another version of you walks the other way, humming the same tune under a slightly different sun. If we think of it this way, perhaps disappearance is not a vanishing at all, but a crossing, like stepping from one wave crest to the next, without realising the sea beneath has changed. The field where David Lang stood might have been thin ground, a a seam between one rhythm of existence and another. Stories like his make us uneasy because they suggest the ordinary is porous, that the walls of reality are not walls at all, but veils. And yet, there's something strangely comforting in that idea. It means the universe is larger than our fears, more generous with possibilities than we can measure. Maybe it's not a trap, but an invitation to wonder, to imagine that nothing truly ends, only moves out of sight. If you stand in a quiet field at dusk, you can almost feel it. The air shimmering slightly as temperature and light shift. The insects fall silent for a moment, as though they too sense the border between one version of the world and another. The breeze carries familiar sounds, a gate creaking, a child's laughter, a voice calling from far away. And maybe, just for a heartbeat, you wonder whether it's coming from here, or from somewhere next to here. We might never know what happened to the farmer who disappeared into sunlight. But the mystery he left behind still hums softly in the grass that would not grow, a reminder that reality might be thinner than it seems, and that each step we take might ripple farther than we can imagine. As we drift further into the story, let's follow that ripple outward, from a single field in Tennessee to the broader question of how such moments might happen at all, and why so many people across time have felt themselves slip for just a moment into another version of home. Sometimes the strangest journeys begin with something ordinary, a small decision, a quiet detour on a sunny day. Carol Chase McElhaney wasn't looking for a mystery. She was driving home from a dog show through Riverside County, California, when she saw the exit for her hometown and thought, almost absently, why not stop by? She hadn't been there in years. A short visit might be nice, she thought, a small reunion with her own past. The road wound gently between dry hills and citrus groves, shimmering under the late afternoon light. Everything felt familiar at first. The signs, the rhythm of the turns, the soft bend of the road as it descended toward the city. But as she crossed into the first neighborhood, something began to feel slightly off. The houses weren't quite where she remembered them. The trees looked younger, or maybe older. The air itself seemed different, thicker somehow, as if the light had weight. Carol slowed her car, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The street names were right, the layout was right, but her childhood home was gone. The yard where her father used to plant roses had vanished, replaced by a strange dark house with mirrored windows. She turned down another block, hoping she'd taken a wrong turn, but there too nothing matched. Her grandmother's house, gone. The bakery she used to visit as a girl, now an empty lot. Even the cemetery where her family rested seemed changed. The stones unfamiliar, the names rearranged like letters in a dream. It wasn't frightening, not exactly. More like the feeling of waking up from a nap in a room that looks familiar but smells different. Like someone has moved the furniture while you slept. She stayed just long enough to feel the growing wrongness, and then she left, driving away with her pulse quickening. The sky behind her deepened to gold, and the town shrank in her rearview mirror until it was just another shape in the light. Years later, she returned, and this time, everything was back to normal. Her grandmother's house stood exactly where it should. The roses bloomed again in the front yard. The streets and shops were just as she remembered them. The world had folded back into place, as if nothing had ever been strange. People call it a dimensional slip, though that phrase sounds too sharp for what it really feels like. Dimensional slip suggests physics and machinery, while what happened to Carol felt more like a sigh in reality, a brief shiver in the surface of the world, then stillness again. If we could see the universe as fabric, woven from light and memory, maybe we'd notice that sometimes the threads shift, just enough for one pattern to blur into another. Stories like hers appear everywhere, whispered on quiet forums, written in old diaries, told in low voices on long drives. People who take the wrong turn and find themselves in a version of home where the air smells faintly wrong, where familiar buildings are mirrored or missing, where a friend they were sure had moved away suddenly hasn't. These aren't ghost stories. They're something subtler. Moments where the map in your mind no longer matches the ground beneath your feet. The human brain builds the world from pieces: light, sound, scent, habit. What we call seeing is really remembering fast enough to keep up with what's in front of us. Every second, your mind guesses what comes next, and most of the time it's right. But once in a while, something falters. The world arrives half a beat out of sync, and the mind corrects itself by stitching a new pattern over the gap. Sometimes, the stitch doesn't hold. That's what déjà vu might be. A tiny overlap between one pattern and another. It's the moment your brain whispers, "I've been here before," because somewhere, some fraction of you truly has. Most scientists describe it as a small glitch in memory, signals crossing between short-term and long-term recall. But when you think about it, that explanation is as poetic as it is rational. Two versions of the same moment, briefly touching, like reflections aligning in a pane of glass. Carol's story and others like it make us question what place really means. Is it coordinates on a map, or the sum of our memories about it? The mind is its own cartographer, drawing invisible borders around comfort, belonging, and time. When those borders shift, even the smallest change feels cosmic. A different shade of light through a kitchen window can make you feel as if you've stepped into another life entirely. There are travellers who describe pulling off the highway to refuel in a town they swear existed, only to find later that no such town appears on any map. A man once told of stopping at a gas station painted in pale turquoise, with a bell above the door that rang like silver. When he returned weeks later, the lot was overgrown, the sign rusted, and no one in the area remembered the place. Of course, there are explanations: misremembered routes, demolished buildings, tricks of light. But the comfort of science doesn't always erase the strangeness of feeling out of step with reality. The simplest moments of confusion can open deep questions. What if perception itself is a fragile bridge, rebuilt every heartbeat? What if each of us walks across that bridge slightly out of rhythm, slipping between overlapping versions of the world that coexist like translucent pages? If reality does have layers, maybe we brush against them all the time and simply don't notice. The way reflections sometimes seem a split second late when you move your hand near a mirror. The way sound bends around corners before you turn them. The way dreams borrow pieces from waking life and return them slightly altered. These might be echoes, small reminders that the world is not one continuous surface but many, vibrating together like thin sheets of glass. It's easy to dismiss such ideas until you find yourself standing in a street you've known your whole life, only to realise it no longer knows you. Maybe that's why Carol's story lingers, because we've all had that brief flicker of unreality, that moment when a familiar room feels borrowed. The feeling fades, but it leaves behind a trace, like the scent of rain before it arrives. If we follow that feeling a little further, we might see that these slips, these moments when the world seems to breathe differently, don't just happen to the places we live in. They happen to people too. Some return from them changed, their memories tangled with the faint outline of another life. Others vanish entirely, leaving behind only questions and the quiet suspicion that they've walked through a doorway the rest of us can't see. There's a particular kind of silence that follows a disappearance. It isn't loud or dramatic. It's the quiet absence that lingers long after the searchers have gone home, after the air itself seems to forget the sound of a name. But sometimes the story doesn't end there. Sometimes people come back, though they return carrying a strange stillness, as if a part of them never made the journey home. One February afternoon in 1978, a college student named Stephen Kubaki set out to ski near Lake Michigan. He was 23, studying languages, an ordinary man in an ordinary winter. He told friends he'd only be gone a few hours, but when night came and the snow hardened under the stars, he didn't return. The next day, his backpack and skis were found near the edge of the frozen lake. His footprints led out onto the ice and then stopped. No hole, no struggle, no sign of a fall. Just tracks that ended mid-step, like punctuation in the middle of a sentence. Search teams combed the area for weeks, but winter can be merciless in the Great Lakes. Everyone assumed the same thing, that he had fallen through thin ice and vanished beneath it. Months passed, and the world moved on. But 15 months later, a man awoke on a grassy hill hundreds of miles away, wearing clothes he didn't recognize. It was Stephen. He didn't remember how he got there, or what had happened in between. He walked to a nearby town, found a phone, and called home. When his family saw him, they wept, but he looked at them like someone waking from a long dream, grateful yet unsure if he'd really returned. He had no memory of the missing year, no images, no fragments of time. His mind was a blank page where something once had been written and then gently erased. Later, he went back to school, finished his degree, and even became a psychologist, helping others navigate the hidden corners of the mind. Perhaps he, more than anyone, knew how easily a person can get lost inside their own story. Some say Stephen simply wandered in confusion, lost in a fugue of exhaustion and snow, but there's something about his case, the clear footprints that stopped mid-lake, the healthy man who reappeared with new belongings and no scars. That feels less like amnesia and more like rearrangement. Maybe he didn't lose a year. Maybe the world around him folded that year away and then quietly put him back where he was meant to be. Another story from a different continent and a different time carries a similar weight. In 2017, a young man in Brazil named Bruno Borges vanished from his locked bedroom. When his family finally broke in, they found the room transformed. The furniture was gone, replaced by a statue of an ancient philosopher who once wrote about infinite worlds and life beyond Earth. The walls were covered in pages of strange text, 14 books worth of writing in a cipher that no one could read. Bruno had been working on it for months in secret, writing through the nights about evolution, higher beings, and something he called the next phase. For 5 months he was gone, with no phone, no money, no trail. When he returned, barefoot and calm, he said only that he'd been working on his ideas. He looked healthy, rested, almost serene, as though he'd gone somewhere deep rather than far. What connects Stephen and Bruno is not their disappearance, but the quietness of their return. Neither seemed frightened, neither could fully explain what had happened. It's as if both had stepped outside the clock for a while, into a place where time pauses and identity loosens its grip. History keeps its own versions of these vanishings, scattered like footprints in different centuries. In the 16th century, there was the entire colony of Roanoke, more than 100 settlers who disappeared, leaving only the word Croatoan carved into a post. In 1900, 3 lighthouse keepers on the tiny island of Flannan vanished, their coats still hanging, a meal left half-finished on the table. The sea that surrounded them was calm. No one ever found a trace. When we look back on such mysteries, our minds reach for explanations. Storms, abduction, madness, conspiracy. But sometimes, what unsettles us most is the possibility that there is an explanation, just one too strange to fit inside our vocabulary. If reality is like a vast tapestry, maybe these disappearances are where the threads loosen for a moment. Physics tells us that on the smaller scale, matter and energy are interchangeable. Nothing truly vanishes. It only changes form. If we soften that idea into imagery, it means the universe is like a story written in invisible ink, sentences appearing and fading as light passes over them. Perhaps Stephen and Bruno and the lighthouse keepers simply walked into a page that wasn't meant for us to read. There's another way to see it. In some versions of quantum theory, the universe doesn't pick one outcome, it allows them all to exist. Each choice, each accident splits the narrative into countless branches. In one branch, a skier falls through the ice. In another, he keeps walking beneath a different sky. In one, a writer vanishes into obsession. In another, he finishes his book and never leaves home. These are not contradictions, but harmonies, different notes played by the same song of existence. You can think of it like this. If the universe is a river, it doesn't just flow forward. It divides and merges, creating quiet eddies where time and matter can swirl. Every now and then, someone drifts into one of those eddies and comes back changed, not because they crossed a border, but because the current itself carried them through a hidden loop. When you listen to enough of these stories, the pattern feels less like chaos and more like rhythm. People vanish mid-step, mid-conversation, mid-breath, as if the universe pauses to take a sip of silence, and then sometimes it exhales, and they return. Maybe that's why such tales have persisted for centuries, not because they're proof of something supernatural, but because they remind us that the world we see is not the world in full. Between one heartbeat and the next, between one blink and another, existence flickers. And in that flicker, perhaps, whole lives unfold and close again, unseen but not unfelt. So when someone says they've lost time, or that they woke in a place they shouldn't be, maybe they haven't lost anything at all. Maybe they've brushed against one of those hidden seams in reality, the quiet fault lines, where one version of the world gives way to another. And when they come back, they carry with them a silence the rest of us can't quite name, the silence of having seen the edges of their own story. If we listen carefully, we might sense those edges too, in the empty field, the locked room, the abandoned lighthouse glowing faintly against the dark sea. The universe is not always continuous. Sometimes it stutters, breathes, and begins again. And as we drift further into our journey, those silences will begin to take shape. We'll follow the ripple of these disappearances beyond space and into something even stranger. The moments when time itself seems to forget which direction it's meant to flow. There are moments when you pause before making choice, standing at a doorway, hand resting on the frame, knowing that whichever path you take will change everything in small, invisible ways. Usually that decision feels contained in a single timeline. You choose, you move, and the other option fades like a shadow behind you. But physics, in its quiet and unsettling way, suggests something else. Imagine a coin tossed into the air. You expect it to fall, heads or tails, but what if it never lands? What if it spins endlessly, existing in both outcomes at once? That's one way to picture what physicists call superposition. It's not a formula written on a blackboard, it's a dance of possibility. The smallest pieces of reality don't pick a side until they must, until something observes them, or perhaps until they simply tire of waiting. For most of history, we believed the universe made singular decisions. A thing was either here or there, alive or gone, one state or another. But quantum physics arrived like a quiet whisper saying, maybe it's both. In the strange world of the very small, every particle carries multiple versions of itself coexisting like overlapping notes in a chord. What we perceive as one reality might be only the melody that our senses can hear. The rest continue playing softly beyond our range. In the 1950s, a young physicist named Hugh Everett took that idea one step further. He suggested that instead of collapsing into one outcome, the universe simply branches. Every time a choice is made by atoms or by people, reality divides, giving each option its own world. You choose to stay home tonight, and somewhere else, another you steps outside into the rain. Both are real, both continue, neither erases the other. It's called the many worlds interpretation, though the name hardly captures its poetry. It means that reality might be a tree growing infinite branches, each carrying its own leaves of possibility. Every moment you live might contain uncountable reflections, each following a different version of your path. If this feels abstract, think of the countless decisions that have shaped your day. What time you woke up, which road you took, which thought you followed instead of another. Each one could be a quiet branching, a fork in the unseen forest of existence. Somewhere, perhaps, another version of you is listening to this very story, but paused a few seconds later, or already drifting into sleep. Even death, in this view, becomes less certain. There's a thought experiment whispered in the hallways of physics, softly now, because it brushes close to philosophy. It suggests that consciousness might always find a version of the world in which it continues. It doesn't mean bodies don't fail or that pain doesn't exist. It means that awareness, like light, might not simply end. It might move to another branch, another outcome, one where survival quietly persists. It's called quantum immortality, though that title sounds too dramatic for what is really an idea about continuity. Imagine your life as a candle burning in a dark room. When the flame flickers, you don't vanish. Instead, the spark moves to another wick somewhere nearby, and the light continues, unaware that it ever dimmed. Maybe that's why some stories of near-death experiences feel less like returns and more like crossings. A sudden shift to another strand of existence, one heartbeat away from the one before. Of course, most scientists treat this not as proof, but as poetry, a way of thinking about what we can't yet measure. And yet, it mirrors something ancient and familiar. Old myths spoke of mirrored worlds, where each choice made here had an echo elsewhere. They called it fate, or spirit, or dream. We call it physics now, but perhaps we've been describing the same mystery all along, the idea that reality is larger than it appears, layered and infinite. What's remarkable about this theory isn't its complexity, it's its kindness. It suggests that every path you didn't take still exists somewhere, still blooming quietly without regret. The words left unsaid, the doors left unopened, the moments you wished you could relive. All of them may be living themselves out in parallel rooms of the cosmos. Each version of you carries a different piece of the same story, like harmonies in one long song. If we listen softly, maybe we can sense it. That faint feeling of having been somewhere before, or knowing what someone will say next, could be echoes of another you, walking a similar path half a breath ahead. Every so often, those paths might brush together, an alignment so brief that we only feel it as déjà vu. In that way, the universe isn't an explosion frozen in time, but a living thing, endlessly unfolding. It doesn't shout when it divides. It splits in silence, so gently that we don't hear it, only sense the afterglow. And if that's true, then maybe disappearance isn't the vanishing we imagine. Maybe those who step off the map simply continue on another branch, where their story still makes sense. To us, they are gone. To themselves, the path never broke. You could think of it as the ultimate mercy of the cosmos, that nothing ever truly stops, it only changes direction. The waves of existence spread outward, colliding, overlapping, whispering to each other across invisible distances. We call those whispers coincidence, memory, intuition. The universe calls them continuity. If we let our thoughts rest here for a moment, the idea becomes oddly comforting. Every ending might be a beginning seen from the wrong side. Every goodbye might be answered somewhere else. Perhaps in another version of this moment, you've already fallen asleep and the world continues telling itself to you in dreams. Our quiet exploration now turns to the instruments we've built to look for these hidden truths. The great circular machine deep beneath the mountains of Switzerland, where humanity tried to glimpse the building blocks of existence and perhaps without meaning to, reminded the universe that we were still listening. Beneath the green hills of Geneva, under quiet villages and vineyards, there is a circle carved into the earth so vast that a person walking through it would never see its end. This is the Large Hadron Collider, a machine that hums softly in the dark, tracing the paths of invisible particles through a tunnel that stretches for 17 miles. Some call it the greatest scientific instrument ever built. Others call it a modern myth, a circle of light that remembers the moment creation began. If you were to stand above it, you'd never know it was there. The fields are calm, cows graze, the Alps rise in the distance. But far below, magnets colder than outer space spin particles faster than any wind on Earth. They move so quickly that they circle the entire ring more than 10,000 times in a single second, crossing paths at points where detectors wait, listening for the tiniest spark of truth. When the collider first started up in 2008, there was a tremor of unease across the world. People wondered what might happen if humanity began recreating the first flicker of the Big Bang. Would it open something we couldn't close? Would it bend space, or even tear it? A few headlines whispered about black holes, tiny ones that might swallow the planet whole. Physicists laughed gently. The machine's power, though immense, was far smaller than nature's own. But the myth remained, because myths always do. That same year, people began noticing odd coincidences, collective memories that didn't match reality, movie lines remembered differently, logos that seemed to have changed, whole events recalled by millions, though history showed no record of them. The Mandela effect, they called it, after so many had sworn they remembered Nelson Mandela dying in prison decades before his real passing. Some wondered if the collider had done more than collide particles. Maybe, they said, it had collided worlds. The truth, as usual, is quieter. The collider wasn't built to break the universe, but to listen to its faintest murmur. Deep inside, protons rush toward each other until they meet with a whisper of energy so small it barely registers. Yet that whisper recreates conditions last seen fractions of a second after the birth of everything. It is a machine built to remember, to glimpse what reality is made of when it forgets to be solid. Imagine standing before a vast ring of magnets, each one guiding a thread of light thinner than a hair, curving it around the circle again and again. Those threads hold the universe's oldest story, the one written in particles that appear and vanish like thoughts. They're not things in the way a stone or a tree is a thing. They are patterns, rhythms, probabilities. They exist as music before they become matter. And when two of those threads meet, they release notes we can measure. Some form particles we already know, like protons or neutrons. Others reveal something new. In 2012, that quiet song gave birth to the Higgs boson, a particle predicted half a century earlier. It wasn't just a discovery, it was confirmation that the invisible scaffolding of the universe truly exists, giving mass to everything that dances within it. To describe what happens there, scientists use equations, but let's translate them softly. The language of the collider isn't mathematics, it's choreography. Each collision is a duet, two dancers moving so fast that for an instant they merge, creating a flash of energy, a brief vibration of existence before they separate again. The detectors, towering instruments of metal and silicon, act like enormous cameras trying to catch a picture of that single step. But what they capture is more than physics, it's intimacy. The same forces that hold galaxies together also hold the atoms in your hand. When the collider recreates the first instant of the universe, it is, in a small way, recreating you. It shows that everything is still connected to that moment, as if the universe never stopped being born. Among physicists, there's a term called non-locality. It means that two particles, once connected, can continue to mirror each other, even when separated by vast distances. Imagine two dancers who part ways, travelling to opposite ends of a ballroom, yet each still moves in rhythm with the other. What one does, the other feels. instantly. No message passes between them. They simply remain part of the same choreography. Einstein once called this spooky action at a distance, though it's less spooky than it is tender, a reminder that connection exists even where distance seems absolute. The collider proves it daily. Collisions reveal patterns that echo across the entire structure, as if the universe itself hums a single note in countless variations. If we soften that idea, it becomes something even more beautiful. Maybe separation is an illusion. Maybe the distance between stars or between you and me is not a gap but a stretch, a note held longer in the same song. When particles whisper to one another across impossible spans, they're not defying physics, they're reminding it that everything once belonged to the same flame. And perhaps that's why myths persist about the collider, because deep down, we recognize it not as a threat, but as a mirror. Ancient stories spoke of circles carved into the earth to summon knowledge. Now we've built one of our own, not to summon gods, but to listen for the voice of the universe itself. If you could stand inside the tunnel and hear what it hears, it would sound like a hum so low it feels more than heard, like the vibration you sense in your chest when the world holds its breath. That hum is reality speaking in its oldest dialect, the one of energy becoming matter, matter becoming meaning, meaning returning to light. When the collider switches on, the mountains above don't tremble, but the idea of reality does. The line between imagination and discovery becomes thin, as if we're remembering something we once knew but forgot. Maybe, in its way, the collider is not creating anything new at all. Maybe it's just revealing what's already there. Worlds folded within worlds, waiting for the right rhythm to open. From these underground rings of motion and light, our story now rises towards something equally strange but smaller. Machines no bigger than your fingernail, whispering calculations in the quiet between possibilities. They too may be reaching across realities in their own way, blurring the line between what's imagined and what's possible. If you listen to the world closely, there is a faint sound that lives beneath the hum of traffic, the ticking of clocks, the sighs of machines. It's the quiet rustle of possibilities, a sound that grows louder the closer we look at how our reality calculates itself. That's what quantum computers do. They listen to the maybes. Ordinary computers live in a tidy world of certainty. Every bit of data is either 1 or 0, on or off, light or dark, a straightforward rhythm. But quantum computers live in the in-between. Their bits, called qubits, can be 1, 0, or both at the same time, like a coin still spinning in the air refusing to decide. Instead of walking one path, these machines take all paths at once, exploring every outcome before returning with an answer. To say that plainly, a quantum computer doesn't guess faster. It fills across possibilities simultaneously. It's like dipping your hand into a stream and finding not just one ripple, but all of them touching your skin at once. The power of these machines doesn't come from brute force, but from their ability to borrow from the realm of uncertainty, the place where the universe itself still hums with potential. Some scientists, like Hartmut Neven at Google, have hinted that these processors grow more powerful faster than any normal curve can explain. It's as if, with each improvement, they are quietly enlisting help from elsewhere. Not another lab, not another city, but from neighbouring layers of reality, the subtle variations of this same universe, humming in parallel. Of course, this is speculation, but poetic speculation often arrives before proof. If you soften the theory, it means that when a quantum computer performs its intricate calculations, it might be consulting other versions of itself, other laboratories running the same experiment in slightly different timelines, all exchanging whispers at the edge of what we call real. Like mirrors aligned so perfectly that light bounces forever between them, each reflection adds its own brightness to the whole. In truth, the math behind such cooperation is tangled and cold, but the feeling it carries is simple. The universe is collaborative by design. Nothing works entirely alone. Even the smallest particle behaves as if it's aware of the others, syncing like fireflies in summer air. There's a human echo to this. Every thought you have ripples through neural patterns that could, in theory, exist in multiple states at once. The mind itself might be a kind of biological quantum computer, reaching into possibilities just beyond the present. When you sense something before it happens, when a memory arrives of an event you haven't lived yet, perhaps it's not magic or prophecy. It's a quiet brush with the parallel lines of your own unfolding story. And it isn't new to wonder this. Centuries before quantum mechanics, mystics and philosophers described the universe as a great web of interwoven lives and moments. Every strand touched every other. They gave it names: Indra's net in Hindu thought, the tapestry of fate in Greek myth, the chi of Taoism. All of them pointed toward the same truth. That existence shares its information across every scale. Today's machines in their humming circuits may simply be learning to do the same. They reach out beyond linear thought, letting many answers coexist until the right one settles, much like the way you sometimes wake from a dream with clarity you didn't know you had. Of course, for every calm vision of science, there are wilder stories, the kind whispered at the edges of curiosity. Some believe experiments like these attract attention from the unseen. Others recall rumours of secret projects. The Philadelphia experiment in the 1940s, said to make a ship vanish into mist. The Montauk Project in the 1980s, a tale of time chairs and psychic soldiers. These stories live somewhere between folklore and fever dream, but they reveal something true about us. When faced with the unknown, we reach for metaphor. We build myths to understand machines, just as we once built gods to understand storms. The collider becomes a modern underworld. The quantum computer becomes a crystal ball of logic. Whether these tales are factual doesn't matter as much as what they say about our longing to believe that our tools can touch the divine, or at least the deeper layers of reality that feel divine in their precision. When you think of a quantum processor working, picture it not as a mechanical box but as a quiet pond. Drop a single thought into it, a problem, a question, and the surface ripples in every direction at once. Every possible solution spreads outward, forming concentric circles that overlap and interfere until in the centre, a single answer rises, calm and clear. That's what computation looks like at the edge of physics. Not noise, but harmony resolving itself. If we could see the equations that describe it, they'd look less like lines of numbers and more like music written in invisible ink. A song of probabilities collapsing into certainty. But since the language of math can sound sharp in the dark, we translate it here into something the heart can hear. The world is not a single melody, but a chord. It's comforting in a way. Every invention that brings us closer to the fabric of reality also brings us closer to its poetry. The machines we build to measure the cosmos are mirrors of our own wandering minds. When they hum, we hum with them. When they find patterns in chaos, it's because we were already searching for the same pattern in ourselves. And perhaps that's why science and myth, for all their differences, so often end up side by side. Both are ways of reaching beyond the limits of what we know. Both speak of unseen connections, threads that hold the world together even when we can't name them. So whether quantum computers truly borrow from other realities, or simply remind us of how wide our own is, the meaning remains. The universe shares its work. Every atom, every thought, every heartbeat is part of a network of exchanges older than time, and if the whispers between realities are real, maybe they aren't a breach or a warning at all. Maybe they're an invitation to listen more carefully, to notice how everything answers everything else. The hum of an engine, the spark in a circuit, the breath between words, all tiny notes in the same unending song. From these quiet machines of possibility, our journey drifts toward another mystery, not in laboratories or equations, but in the air around us. For if space and matter can blur their borders, then perhaps time can too. Somewhere above the clouds, a pilot once looked down and saw tomorrow. It was 1935, and the sky above Scotland was the kind of grey that seems to breathe. Clouds rolled like slow waves stretching from horizon to horizon. Wing Commander Sir Victor Goddard, a respected pilot and engineer, was flying home after an inspection when the weather turned. The rain thickened, and the light dimmed until the world became a blur of silver and shadow. The compass twitched. The altimeter wavered. He should have turned back. But curiosity, that old companion of both scientists and dreamers, nudged him forward. He descended through a break in the storm and found himself above an airfield, a small one he recognised at first as Drem, a training base he'd visited years before. But something was wrong. The hangars were newly painted, the tarmac gleamed black and smooth, and planes he didn't recognise were parked in neat rows, painted a bright yellow he had never seen in service. The mechanics wore blue overalls, not the brown of his day. The whole place looked alive, clean, and strangely modern. He circled once, thinking perhaps the rain had disoriented him, but the airfield below was too clear, too vivid, as if drawn from a different time. When he emerged from the clouds again, it was gone, replaced by the decaying base he remembered, overgrown and silent. 4 years later, the Royal Air Force renovated Drem. The hangars were repainted. The new yellow training planes arrived. The mechanics wore blue. Everything exactly as he had seen it in the storm. The story of Sir Victor Goddard still ripples through the quiet corners of aviation history, not as proof of time travel, but as one of those rare, shimmering moments when time seems to fold in on itself. What he witnessed might have been a glimpse into the future, or a memory out of order. Either way, it hints that time is less like a straight line and more like a landscape, with fog rolling back and forth across its valleys. You might think of time as an arrow, moving cleanly forward. But that's only how it feels at our scale. On the level of the universe, time behaves more like water, flowing, eddying, curving around gravity's fingers. Physicists call it the fabric of space-time, though that phrase can sound too stiff. Imagine instead a sheet of silk floating in a slow current. Every massive thing, a planet, a star, even you, presses gently into that silk, creating ripples that bend the flow around them. To move through space is to move through those ripples, and sometimes maybe a ripple folds back, just enough for 2 moments to touch. The idea isn't fantasy. Einstein's theory of relativity, when translated softly, tells us that time stretches and squeezes depending on where you are and how fast you move. A clock on a mountaintop ticks a little faster than one by the sea. A clock inside a speeding spacecraft ticks slower than one on Earth. The difference is tiny, almost unnoticeable, but real. The faster you go, the slower time moves for you. In extreme cases, near the edge of a black hole, where gravity pulls even light into silence, time can almost stop. So, if time can stretch and twist under the right conditions, why not imagine that it might also fold? That somewhere between lightning and cloud, between heartbeat and memory, there's a brief overlap where one moment brushes another. Perhaps that's what Goddard flew through, a fold in the silk, a shimmer of tomorrow bleeding into today. Other travellers have reported similar moments. In 1996, on Bold Street in Liverpool, a man crossed the road and found himself surrounded by people dressed from the 1950s. Storefronts displayed goods long vanished, and the air smelled of coal smoke instead of traffic. When he blinked, everything was modern again. In 1901, 2 English women visiting Versailles claimed to have wandered into the 18th century, seeing Marie Antoinette sketching under a tree. Their story, too detailed to dismiss yet too strange to confirm, became a classic of what people now call time slips. Science doesn't deny these experiences, it just describes them differently. The brain, it says, sometimes misfires in its sense of sequence, overlapping the signals that tell us now from those that say then. But even that explanation, when you listen closely, feels poetic. The mind is the instrument through which time plays its music, and like any instrument, it can sometimes catch two notes at once. If we translate the physics gently, relativity tells us that time isn't something separate from space, it's woven into it. A moment and a place are threads of the same weave. When something moves fast enough or heavy enough, it tugs on those threads. It's as if the universe is a vast loom, and each star, each planet, each thought pulls ever so slightly on the pattern. Sometimes, those threads cross in ways we don't expect. The fabric wrinkles. A pilot in a storm glimpses a future not yet woven. Think about how you experience time when you dream. Minutes stretch into hours. Whole lifetimes unfold in seconds. The clock doesn't change, but the story does. Dreams are a reminder that time isn't absolute. It's elastic, responsive to consciousness itself. Maybe the universe dreams too. Maybe what we call time slips are just its way of remembering forward. For Goddard, the moment in the storm passed quickly. He landed safely, told his story quietly, and spent the rest of his life as a respected figure in aviation. He didn't claim to understand what had happened, only that he had seen something he couldn't explain. He described it calmly, almost tenderly, as if the experience had left him humbled rather than shaken. And perhaps that's the lesson hidden in such stories. They remind us that mystery doesn't always come wrapped in fear. Sometimes it arrives in the form of an ordinary man flying through a storm, catching a glimpse of tomorrow, then returning to tell us that time might not be as strict as we imagine. If time can ripple like water, then maybe it can also echo. Those echoes might explain why we sometimes feel events before they occur, or sense a change in the air before news arrives. Maybe our thoughts, too, leave small footprints in the landscape of time, to be found later by our future selves. In the end, whether Sir Victor saw tomorrow or simply brushed against the mind's deep machinery, his story leaves us with a soft truth. Time isn't a ruler, it's a rhythm. It bends, hums, and occasionally sings the same note twice. The path now carries us toward the other side of this rhythm, toward flights that never landed, ships that vanished mid-journey, and moments when entire stories seem to slip not forward or backward, but sideways into the quiet folds of the hours between hours. Far above the clouds, where radio waves fade into static and the sky turns the colour of sleep, there are places pilots prefer not to talk about. Not because they are cursed, but because they are uncertain, stretches of air where instruments falter, compasses drift, and time itself seems to breathe in and out like a restless sea. The Bermuda Triangle is one of those places, a wide blue silence between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico that has collected more mysteries than storms. It's easy to dismiss it as a legend, a story passed between sailors and pilots, polished smooth by decades of retelling. But like all legends, it began with something real. In December of 1945, 5 US Navy bombers, Flight 19, set out on a routine training mission. The weather was clear, the crew experienced. Yet somewhere over the Atlantic, their transmissions grew confused. One pilot reported that the ocean looked strange, as if the water wasn't quite the right colour. Their compasses began to spin, pointing nowhere. "We can't tell where we are," the flight leader said, his voice tight with disbelief. "Everything looks wrong." They vanished. No wreckage, no distress signals, no survivors. The rescue plane sent after them disappeared too. For weeks, search teams scoured the sea, but they found nothing. Only waves that reflected back a sky that seemed oddly indifferent. And that was only the beginning. Over the years, ships have been found adrift with no crew, radios silent, meals still on tables. Planes have vanished from radar mid-flight, only to reappear hours later as if time had lost its place in line. Scientists have offered countless explanations. Methane bubbles rising from the seafloor, magnetic anomalies, weather patterns, simple human error. All of them make sense on paper, yet the feeling remains. Something about that corner of the ocean hums at a different frequency. This same quiet strangeness has been found elsewhere too. Off the coast of Brazil, there is a region called the South Atlantic Anomaly, a vast pocket where Earth's magnetic field weakens. Satellites passing overhead glitch and blink. Astronauts see flashes of light behind their closed eyes. It's as if the planet itself has a bruise, a place where the invisible fabric that shields us from cosmic rays grows thin. Engineers describe it as a technical problem. Philosophers might call it a reminder that even Earth has seams. If you soften the science, magnetism is simply the language of motion, the invisible threads connecting matter and direction. When those threads tangle, the compass forgets which way to point, and maybe, just maybe, so does time. Take another story. Pan Am Flight 914, a passenger plane that supposedly took off from New York in 1955 and disappeared without a trace, only to land in Caracas, Venezuela, 37 years later. The crew and passengers were alive, still wearing mid-century clothes, still believing it was 1955. Airport officials were stunned. And then, before anyone could make sense of it, the plane reportedly took off again and vanished into the sky. Most historians consider the story fiction, a modern parable born from old fears. But even as fiction, it touches a truth, that time is not as linear as we imagine. Einstein once said that past, present and future are only illusions, however persistent. To translate that softly, time may not flow like a river at all, but like a lake stirred by wind. Ripples crossing and overlapping, moments touching that were never meant to meet. Sometimes those ripples might be large enough to carry more than just light or memory. Maybe they carry ships, or planes, or entire stories, slipping sideways through the folds of their own reflection. If that sounds impossible, remember, the same equations that describe gravity also describe curvature. The fabric of space-time, like any fabric, can wrinkle, and when it does, who's to say what might fall through the fold? You can think of the universe as a great blanket being slowly tugged at every corner by stars and planets. Where gravity is strong, the fabric dips. Where it is weak, it lifts. The Bermuda Triangle, the South Atlantic Anomaly, perhaps even the places where compasses falter, all could be spots where the weave is loose, where the threads of time and space fray just enough for something to slip between them. Not vanish, just wander. There are modern counterparts to these stories too. In national parks across North America, people disappear every year without a trace, cases known collectively as the missing 411. Some vanish within sight of others, their footprints ending abruptly in soft ground, as if the trail itself decided to stop existing. Most have rational explanations: terrain, weather, fatigue. But others remain open-ended, their endings unwritten. Maybe, like the pilot of Flight 19 or the passenger of a plane that shouldn't exist anymore, they simply stepped into a place where time paused for a breath. In the language of physics, the gravitational field in a given region can slow the passing of time. To say that softly, time is pliable, like warm clay. Under the weight of the world, it bends, holding its shape for a while before slowly smoothing out again. If that's true, then the world contains countless pockets where time doesn't flow evenly. Most are microscopic, harmless. Some perhaps are wide enough to walk through. But maybe we don't need to leave the ground to experience it. You've probably felt it yourself, the way certain moments stretch impossibly long, while others vanish before you can hold them. Minutes with someone you love feel like seconds. Minutes in fear feel like hours. The physics is the same, but perception rewrites the tempo. If time can bend inside the mind, why not outside it? Perhaps these stories of missing planes and reappearing ships are not evidence of other worlds, but mirrors reflecting how we experience our own. We vanish into dreams each night and return without question. We fall into memory and emerge changed. Maybe these physical mysteries are reminders of that simple truth, that disappearance and return are part of the same motion, like waves folding into themselves. So the next time you hear about a ship gone missing or a plane lost beyond radar, imagine that it hasn't been destroyed or devoured. Imagine instead that it's hovering just a breath away, sailing along another fold in time's gentle fabric, waiting for the current to bring it back. If we follow this current a little further, we'll find ourselves at the edge of consciousness itself, where dreams become lifetimes and minutes stretch into years. Because if space can fold and time can twist, then perhaps the mind too can open its own doors into parallel worlds, and sometimes when we dream, those doors swing quietly ajar. Sometimes the longest journeys happen without leaving the bed. You close your eyes for a moment, the kind where you mean only to rest them, and when you open them again, a lifetime has passed. In the dream, you've lived, loved, built a home, watched seasons come and go, and then you wake up, back in the same room, the same night, with the clock barely moved. The air feels wrong, too thin for all the years you've just carried back with you. There are people who tell stories like that. One man dreamed he was a musician in another city, another life, entirely. He remembered the smell of his apartment, the friends who came to hear him play, even the weight of the instrument in his hands. In the dream, decades passed. When he woke, the song he'd written there was still in his head. He wrote it down. It was real. Another woman dreamed she was married, with children grown and gone. She woke weeping, unable to shake the sense of loss. For days she felt as if her real life were the dream, and the dream the world that had been taken from her. Neurologists might say this is just how the brain organises memory, that dreams compress time the way lightning compresses light. But if we listen a little differently, perhaps it means something more, that consciousness is capable of stretching across multiple stories at once, inhabiting many lives as easily as one. When we dream, the boundaries between what's inside and what's outside loosen. The brain's sense of linear time flickers, letting moments from past and future overlap like ripples on water. The same neurons that fire when we walk through a door in waking life can fire again while we sleep, recreating movement so vividly that our bodies twitch. It's as if the mind rehearses possibilities, not just memories, running simulations of lives that could have been, or might still be somewhere. Near-death experiences offer another window into this strange elasticity of consciousness. In 1991, a woman named Pam Reynolds underwent a rare surgery that required her brain activity to be completely shut down. Her body was cooled, her blood drained from her head, her eyes taped shut. By every clinical measure, she was not conscious, and yet when she woke, she described watching the surgery from above, seeing instruments, hearing specific conversations that doctors later confirmed were accurate. Skeptics explain it as the brain's last bursts of energy, a kind of internal movie playing as oxygen fades. But even that explanation carries its own quiet wonder. The brain, in its final moments of silence, creates visions of light and warmth, reunions and music. It paints doorways instead of walls. If we soften the language of science, we could say that consciousness isn't a lamp burning inside the skull, but a candle lit on both sides, awareness shining inward and outward at once. It doesn't vanish when the flame flickers. It spreads, seeking another wick. Perhaps the mind, in its infinite creativity, has learned the same trick the universe uses, to exist in more than one state at a time. Quantum physics tells us that even the smallest particles of matter can be in multiple places until observed. To translate that gently, the universe holds many drafts of every moment, waiting to see which one we choose to notice. Maybe dreams are where we wander through those other drafts, the worlds that didn't quite make it into daylight, but continue unfolding in the dark. It's an idea that doesn't need to be proved to be felt. Think of the dreams that, linger long after you wake, the ones that seem to hum at the edge of your thoughts for days, their landscapes fading but never quite gone. They feel like memories borrowed from another life. Perhaps they are. In some cultures, dreams are not seen as illusions but as visits. The Aboriginal Australians speak of the dream time, the eternal layer of reality where ancestors, places and events all coexist, where creation is still happening in every moment. To dream is to touch that level of being, to walk among the ongoing story of the world. The Egyptians thought the soul had many parts, one of which travelled during sleep, collecting wisdom and returning before dawn. Even in modern times, we speak casually of sleeping on a problem, trusting that something unseen will work it out while we rest. Maybe dreams are the brain's way of doing what the universe itself does, testing possibilities, weaving probabilities, seeing what holds together. Just as a quantum particle explores all its paths before settling, our consciousness might drift through many realities before morning, choosing one to wake into. The others continue without us, silent, like songs that fade when we change the station, and sometimes that choice feels thin. There are people who wake from long dreams unable to shake the feeling that they've left someone behind, a spouse, a child, a version of themselves that still exists somewhere. It's easy to call that longing imagination. But it might also be recognition, the sense that the self is larger than a single timeline. When we dream, we die a little and are reborn again countless times each night. The heart slows, the breath deepens, and the world around us dissolves into patterns of light and story. Every dawn is a resurrection, every sleep a rehearsal for the infinite. Perhaps that's why waking can feel so abrupt, like being pulled from one gravity into another. Scientists have measured the electrical rhythms of dreaming brains, but they can't capture the colours, the textures, the infinite rooms we wander through. Those details belong to another kind of physics, the physics of feeling, where energy takes the form of memory and matter becomes meaning. Dreams remind us that consciousness is not bound by clocks or calendars. It's an ocean, and waking life is only one of its shores. When you drift across that ocean, you're not escaping reality. You're visiting its other side. Every night, you travel between universes. Every morning you return, bringing back a few fragments of stardust that the day will quietly wear away. And if that sounds like poetry, perhaps that's because reality itself is written in verse, each heartbeat a stanza, each breath a line. The universe may be infinite, but it still rhymes. Our quiet exploration now turns toward the civilizations that intuited this long before equations existed. Cultures that saw the sky, the earth, and the underworld not as separate realms, but as reflections of each other. They built stairways of stone and trees of light, reaching for the same mystery we still whisper about today. That existence may not be one world, but many, stacked gently like pages in a sacred book. Long before we built observatories or wrote equations, people looked at the night sky and saw layers. The heavens were not just above, they were stacked like reflections in water. To the ancients, the universe was a vast house with many rooms, each one lit by a different kind of light. And though their words were wrapped in myth, the feeling behind them was familiar, a sense that existence was deeper than what the eye could see. In ancient Egypt, they called the other world the Duat, a landscape beneath the horizon, where the sun travelled each night. It wasn't a place of punishment or reward, but a mirror of the living world, filled with rivers, mountains, and gates of fire. Every sunset was the sun's descent into that hidden dimension, sailing on its golden bark through the underworld, greeted by gods who guarded its passage. When dawn came, it was not rebirth, but return, the completion of a cosmic circuit. The Egyptians believed that each person was made of several selves. There was the Ka, the vital spark that needed food and companionship even after death, and the Ba, the mobile soul, often shown as a bird with a human face, free to fly between the worlds. Life was the conversation between these two, the car grounded, the bar forever wandering. And together they formed the Ak, the luminous union of spirit that could travel with the sun. In their way, they had already imagined what we now call parallel existence, not one soul in one body, but many aspects moving in different realms at once. Across the desert and ocean, another vision grew. In the sacred texts of India, the cosmos was divided into 14 locus, or worlds, 7 higher, 7 lower. These were not stacked like floors of a building, but woven like harmonies in music. Each had its own vibration, its own tone of being. To live virtuously was to rise in frequency. To sink into ignorance was to drift downward into denser notes of reality. But every loka, high or low, was still part of one grand instrument. The universe was a single song, and consciousness was the musician. The Mayans, half a world away, built their temples as living calendars, each level a verse in the poem of creation. They spoke of 13 heavens above and 9 underworlds below, both contained within the living earth. When they climbed their pyramids, it wasn't to reach the gods, but to trace the pattern of time itself, cycles within cycles, past and future folded together. Their gods didn't live in unreachable skies. They moved through layers of reality that overlapped the mortal one like transparent veils. In the cold north, the Norse told of Yggdrasil, the great ash tree that bound all things together. Its roots drank from wells of knowledge and death. Its branches brushed the halls of gods and giants alike. 9 worlds hung upon it, realms of fire, ice, shadow and light. When the wind sighed through the branches, it was said to carry messages between them. The tree was not merely a bridge, it was the universe itself, alive, breathing, endlessly renewing. To the Greeks, the cosmos was a layered melody as well. Olympus above, Earth in the middle, and Hades below, 3 notes of the same chord. The gods didn't dwell beyond reach. They lived at the top of a mountain that could still be seen from the plains. Their heaven was geographical, not abstract, reminding mortals that the divine and the mundane shared the same landscape, just different elevations of awareness. Across all these stories, the pattern is the same. Existence is not a flat surface, but a series of reflections, each one echoing the one above it. The Egyptians spoke of mirrored souls, the Hindus of overlapping frequencies, the Mayans of time layered like steps, the Norse of worlds linked by roots, and the Greeks of life lived on parallel heights. Different languages, same intuition. Reality repeats itself gently at every scale. If we translate their myths into our modern tongue, we could say that the ancients understood something close to what physicists now describe with equations. Space and time are connected. Energy and matter exchange places. The smallest vibration can echo through every level of being. But where scientists speak of dimensions and forces, the ancients spoke of light and breath. Both are true in their own dialects. Both try to describe the same invisible architecture, the way existence folds and unfolds like a breathing lung. It's easy to imagine that these early cosmologies were attempts to make sense of fear, of death, of stars, of the endless unknown. But there's tenderness in them too. They don't depict separation between heaven and earth, they depict continuity. The sun dies each night only to rise again. The soul leaves the body but carries the memory of it like a scent. The gods walk among mortals because everything in the cosmos is part of the same living pulse. You can still see traces of those maps in the way we build and dream. The shape of a cathedral spire rising through shadow into light, the layered terraces of a pagoda, the quiet symmetry of a mandala, they all repeat the same pattern. Even in modern art, in skyscrapers of glass, in the stacked circuits of microchips, there is that same impulse, to imitate the invisible, to capture the way reality seems to loop back on itself. Maybe that's why these old stories still soothe us. They remind us that our lives are not isolated lines, but threads in a tapestry too vast to view all at once. Every culture, in its own way, drew a map of the unseen, tracing pathways between the visible and the imagined. And if those maps differ in detail, they align in direction. They all point inward and upward at the same time, suggesting that the road to other worlds might begin within. They built their cosmologies like mirrors, one reflecting another, until the whole sky seemed alive with echoes. And when we look up tonight, at the thin veil of atmosphere, at the quiet shimmer of stars, we're not just seeing space, we're seeing what they saw, layers upon layers, endless reflections, and the comforting thought that maybe our world is only one surface of a much deeper light. As we drift further into the story, those reflections begin to take shape in stone and ritual. People didn't just imagine the many worlds, they built them, climbing stairways meant to touch the unseen, shaping mountains into temples that hummed with the rhythm of eternity. The next step of our journey rises toward those stairways and the quiet breath of the ancient builders who believed that heaven and earth were never truly apart. If you stand at the base of an ancient pyramid, the first thing you notice isn't its height, it's the silence it holds. The air around it feels different, heavier with memory, as though the stones themselves remember being lifted into place under a burning sun thousands of years ago. Each block is more than a stone. It's a heartbeat in a structure that was meant to outlast seasons, empires, and even language itself. These monuments were not built merely to touch the sky. They were built to translate it, to pull the pattern of the heavens down to the ground so that human beings could stand inside it. The pyramid, the ziggurat, the temple, all were mirrors of the cosmos, their steps and chambers arranged according to stars and solstices. They were stairways of belief, rising toward an unseen summit, and in every culture that built them, there's a quiet echo of the same longing, to reach the place where earth and heaven breathe the same air. In Egypt, the Great Pyramid was more than a tomb. Its passageways align precisely with the North Star, its angles echoing the geometry of sunlight itself. When translated softly, it's as if the builders tried to freeze a ray of light in stone, to anchor eternity in a single moment. Inside, corridors rise and fall like breaths, guiding the soul's ascent toward the field of stars. Far to the east, the Mesopotamian ziggurats rose like mountains born of human hands. Their name, Zikurat, means to build high. Each level represented a world, and the summit a resting place for the divine. The steps were narrow, deliberate, demanding humility with every climb. Priests would ascend with offerings of incense, the smoke curling upward as if the air itself carried prayers back down in return. To climb such a structure was to walk the boundary between the visible and the invisible, each step an act of faith that the two realms were not separate but intertwined. The Maya carried that same geometry across an ocean and a millennium. Their pyramids were calendars written in stone. At Chichen Itza, the Great Pyramid of Kukulkan marks the equinox with a miracle of light, a serpent of shadow sliding down its steps. Is not a trick of architecture so much as a conversation between stone and sun, a reminder that the world listens and answers if you build with enough attention. The Celts, though they left fewer monuments of stone, built their stairways in time. Each year at the festival of Samhain, the night when the veil between worlds was said to thin, they lit fires on hilltops and believed the spirits of ancestors walked among them again. The living left doors open and food on tables, welcoming their visitors as family. It was less a haunting than a reunion. Samhain wasn't about fear. It was about remembering that the walls between life and death, like mist, are thin enough to breathe through. In Australia, the Aboriginal peoples didn't build temples, they sang them. Their cosmology lives in songlines, invisible pathways that cross the continent, tracing the journeys of ancestral beings who sang the world into existence. To walk a songline is to move through space and time simultaneously, joining creation in progress. Every rock, tree and river carries its own verse in that endless song, The earth itself is the temple, and every traveller is both pilgrim and priest. In China, the Taoists describe the universe as a flow of qi, the living breath that moves between all things. To them, reality was not divided into worlds above and below, but balanced currents that interweave like the tides of the ocean. The task of the sage was not to escape the world, but to align with its rhythm. Meditation, movement, art, all were ways of tuning oneself to the invisible frequency of nature. They believed that when the body and the breath matched the world's pulse, the line between human and cosmic disappeared. Across these cultures, the pattern repeats, humanity building bridges between layers of existence, whether in stone, in song or in silence. The pyramid's shadow, the ziggurat's smoke, the Celtic fire, the Aboriginal chant, all are variations of the same design. Each one tries to harmonise the physical with the unseen, to make matter sing the same tune as spirit. If we translate that into the language of feeling, what they were really building was resonance. Like strings on a harp, they tried to find the tone that would let heaven and earth vibrate together. Every step upward, every chant, every carved alignment was a way to coax the unseen to reveal itself for a moment, a shimmer in the ordinary air. Modern science might explain this in terms of acoustics, light, or geometry. The chambers of certain temples do amplify sound, and the patterns of sunlight and shadow at equinoxes are predictable cycles. But these explanations don't subtract from the wonder, they complete it. What the ancients discovered through devotion, we now rediscover through observation. The equation and the prayer are different names for the same act of awe. If you've ever stood on a mountain and felt the world grow still, you know the sensation. The higher you climb, the quieter it gets, until even your heartbeat sounds like part of the wind. You begin to understand why humans have always built upward, not just to reach the gods, but to find a place where the noise of daily life fades enough for the universe to whisper back. Maybe that's what temples really are, listening posts between worlds. The pyramid listens to the sun, the ziggurat listens to the stars, the human heart listens to both, and somewhere between those frequencies the boundaries blur. When we look at these ancient stairways today, eroded and weathered, their tops broken by time, we might imagine they've lost their purpose, but perhaps they still function perfectly. Perhaps they were never meant to carry the body at all. Perhaps they were built so that thought itself could climb them, so that even now, when we close our eyes, our minds can ascend the same invisible steps, following the slow rhythm of breath and wonder, until the air feels tuned again. And as we reach that quiet height in our imagination, the story opens into another chapter of crossings, those that don't happen in temples or dreams, but in the ordinary world, when someone steps out of the mist speaking a language we almost recognise. For even after the pyramids crumbled and the fires dimmed, the stories kept walking, travellers from elsewhere, carrying reminders that the boundaries between worlds are only as strong as our disbelief. Every culture tells stories of visitors, figures who arrive without warning, speaking in unfamiliar tongues, wearing clothes from nowhere, and carrying an air of quiet bewilderment. They are the travellers who don't quite belong to the world they appear in. Sometimes they emerge from forests or fields. Sometimes they stumble ashore from the sea. They are never gods, never ghosts, just human enough to unsettle us. Their presence feels like a memory we can't quite place, a reminder that the border between worlds might be thinner than the grass that grows upon it. One of the oldest and gentlest of these tales comes from 12th century England. In the small village of Woolpit, farmers harvesting their crops discovered two children near a pit. The boy and the girl both alive, but unlike any children the villagers had ever seen. Their skin was tinted a faint green, as though they had lived in twilight. They wore strange woven clothes of an unknown fabric, and spoke a language no one could understand. When brought into the village, they refused all food until someone offered them green beans, which they ate eagerly, as though recognizing them from home. In time, the colour faded from their skin. The boy grew ill and died, but the girl survived, learning English and slowly describing where she had come from. She said her people lived underground in a land without sun, where the light was perpetual twilight. There was another land beyond a river of brilliance, she said. And once, when she and her brother followed the sound of bells, they crossed a boundary and woke in the fields of Woolpit. She lived out her days in England, marrying, working, becoming part of the village. But the story never left her, and neither did the people's wonder. What had happened? Who were the children of the green world? To historians, it's an allegory, perhaps a garbled memory of refugees or orphans, or the effects of malnutrition. But the story endures because it feels older than explanation, older even than England. It speaks to a truth the rational mind can't quite measure, that sometimes people step through the seams of reality, carrying the colours of the world they came from. Centuries later, the same story seemed to replay itself in a modern age of passports and border control. In 1954, at Tokyo's Haneda Airport, customs officers stopped a man whose documents looked perfectly ordinary except for one thing. His passport was from a country that didn't exist. The nation's name was Torid, located, he said, between France and Spain. The official showed him a map. He frowned and pointed to the area we call Andorra, confused that the map bore a different name. His currency matched no known system. His stamps and papers were detailed and authentic, yet from nowhere. He was detained overnight, placed in a secure hotel room under guard. The next morning the room was empty. The man, his belongings and his mysterious papers were gone. Skeptics call it urban legend, a story that sprouted in magazines and grew into myth. But again, truth may not be the point. What matters is the rhythm of the tale. Someone steps into our world from a place almost like ours, stays just long enough to make us question the map, and then vanishes before we can prove they were ever here. There are quieter examples too. In 19th century Nova Scotia, a mute man with no memory of who he was washed ashore, his hands scarred as if by frost or friction. Locals called him Jerome of Sandy Cove. He never spoke of his origin, and for 40 years he lived among them, a mystery wrapped in silence. In old seafaring folklore, he became a symbol of the border between life and something else, caught between storms and dreams. Like the Green Children, he belonged to no nation but to the story itself. Even the medieval legend of Lesbia, a young woman found wandering the countryside of Germany, fits the pattern. She claimed to have come from a place that could not be found on any map, a land of perpetual dawn. She described its light as soft and sourceless, as if the sky itself glowed from within. Then she too disappeared, perhaps back to where she began. These stories stretch across centuries and continents, yet their shape is the same. Someone arrives out of nowhere, belonging to a slightly different version of the world. They carry no miracles, no warnings, only confusion, fatigue, and a hint of melancholy. They are strangers displaced not in space, but in reality's coordinates. If we translate this pattern into the language of the heart, perhaps they represent more than folklore. Maybe they are reflections of our own hidden selves, parts of us that don't quite fit into the single story of who we think we are. Every person has their inner foreigner, a version that looks out the window and feels slightly out of sync with the hour, as if they've woken up in the wrong life. When we meet the legends of the Green Children or the man from Torid, we recognise that feeling disguised as myth. Even science, in its way, nods toward these possibilities. Theories of multiple realities suggest that endless versions of Earth might exist side by side, separated not by distance but by vibration, thin membranes of probability. In some, history took different turns. In others, even the colour of sunlight might be slightly altered. If we soften that into imagery, it's like a stack of pages so thin that wind could slip between them, or like chords in a symphony resonating at different tones. Every so often, A note from one chord drifts into another, and for a moment, two worlds overlap. Perhaps that's all these stories are, moments of resonance. A shepherd hears bells where there are none and follows the sound into a field that doesn't belong to his world. A traveller arrives at a station where no one speaks his language but everyone somehow understands. Each tale is a reminder that existence has depth, that there are still doorways even if we've forgotten how to see them. And maybe that's why such stories stay with us. They offer the comfort that our world is porous, that what we lose might not be gone, only elsewhere. The Green Children, the man from Torid, the strangers from forgotten lands, they stand at the edge of the known, waving back to us from across the fog. Every century retells the same story. Someone comes from elsewhere, speaking a language we almost understand. It's the same melody, played in new keys. It reminds us that curiosity is the oldest bridge between worlds. If we follow that bridge further, we'll find that we don't always need strangers or myths to glimpse other realities. Sometimes, the world itself carries them, hidden in its landscapes, painted into its mountains, reflected in its deserts and pools of salt. The next part of our journey will rest our feet back on Earth, where the horizon itself becomes the mirror. Sometimes the Earth itself feels like it's remembering something. You can stand in a landscape so strange that it seems to be dreaming of another world, one where colours don't obey the rules of daylight, and the horizon behaves like a mirror. These places exist not in legend, but on maps. Real coordinates, real air, real wind. And yet, when you stand among them, you can't help but feel that you've stepped sideways into a version of the planet that slipped slightly out of sync with the one you came from. The Salar de Uyuni in Bolivia is one such place. Stretching for miles in every direction, it is the largest salt flat on Earth. A vast plain of white so smooth that it erases perspective. After rain, a thin layer of water gathers across its surface, turning the ground into a perfect reflection. The sky no longer ends above you. It continues beneath your feet. You can walk forward and see yourself walking toward yourself, suspended between two infinities. There's no sound but the crunch of salt and the whisper of wind that seems to come from nowhere. If there were ever a natural portal between worlds, it would look like this. An endless mirror where the world is doubled, and every step feels like a question about which side you're truly on. Scientists explain the salt flat as the remnant of an ancient lake, its minerals crystallized by sun and wind over tens of thousands of years. It's a geological wonder, yes, but that doesn't undo its poetry. The Earth, after all, is made of both fact and feeling. A scientist might say light reflects off the surface at shallow angles, but what we see is something more intimate. The planet remembering the shape of its own sky. Thousands of miles away, in China's Gansu province, the Zhangye Danxia landform rises like a painter's dream made solid. Hills and cliffs ripple in layers of red, yellow, violet and gold, bands of colour so bright they look impossible, as if the Earth had forgotten to stay realistic. The pattern was formed by the patient hand of time, mineral deposits layering and folding, wind and rain brushing them into waves. But when you look at them, you can't think of erosion or sediment. You think of brushstrokes, of fingers trailing across wet pigment, of a planet practicing art for its own amusement. At sunset, the colours intensify, glowing as though lit from within. Travellers often describe the silence there as heavy, as if sound itself hesitates to disturb the view. You can almost imagine the hills humming quietly, a reminder that the same forces that sculpted them also sculpted us. We are, in a sense, made of the same pigments. Iron paints our blood red, copper gives our nerves their spark, calcium our bones their whiteness. The mountains are not distant, they're ancestral. Further west in Turkey lies Pamukkale, whose name means cotton castle. It's a landscape of terraces made of gleaming white stone, where warm mineral water cascades down from hot springs. The terraces form shallow pools that reflect the sky like polished silver. In photographs, the place looks like snow, but when you walk there, the ground is warm, soft underfoot and faintly steaming. This wonder was born from water that carries dissolved limestone. As it flows downhill, it cools, leaving behind its minerals in delicate layers. Over centuries, the deposits hardened into terraces. It's a slow process, so slow that it feels alive. Each ripple in, the stone marks a century of patience, a heartbeat of geology. Standing there, you can feel how time itself becomes visible when it moves gently enough. There is a word geologists use for the way minerals crystallize into repeating patterns: structure. But the word feels too small for what happens here. The terraces of Pamukkale look less like structure, and more like serenity frozen into form. They remind us that the universe doesn't rush. It shapes even stone with a tenderness that only patience can teach. Across these three places, Uyuni, Jangye, Pamukkale, the pattern repeats. Water, salt, wind and light combine in different ways to create landscapes that look almost supernatural, yet arise from simple elements obeying natural laws. The physics behind them is ordinary. The feeling they create is not. It's as though the universe occasionally allows beauty to get ahead of explanation. If we translate the science softly, we might say that nature works like a slow painter. It adds a layer of dust here, a shimmer of colour there, and then waits, sometimes for thousands of years, for the composition to reveal itself. What we call erosion or sedimentation are really gestures of time. They show that creation isn't an event, but a continuous act, still unfolding, still refining. Perhaps that's why these landscapes move us so deeply. They prove that the line between reality and wonder doesn't need to be crossed. It can exist in the same place. You don't need another universe to experience something unearthly. You just need to notice how this one keeps surprising itself. When you stand in Uyuni's mirror and see the sky reflected beneath your feet, you understand for a moment what it means to be infinite. When you walk through the coloured hills of Jangye, you feel what it means for time to have a pulse. When you touch the terraces of Pamukkale, warm with water that has travelled through the Earth's heart, you sense that the planet itself is still dreaming. Some travellers describe these places as sacred, though not in the sense of belonging to any religion. They are sacred because they invite silence, because they remind you that the world was already beautiful before anyone named it. In those moments, the boundary between science and spirituality fades, and what's left is something simpler, an awareness that we are guests on a planet that knows how to paint. Maybe the Earth has always been trying to show us that it doesn't need another realm to astonish us. The multiverse may exist, but so does the miracle of sunlight on salt, of minerals glowing after rain. Each reflection, each pattern, each impossible colour is a whisper. You're already standing in a universe that knows how to make itself new every day. If we listen to that whisper, it leads us toward the subtler signs, the invisible vibrations that hum beneath our feet and stretch through the air. For even when the earth looks still, it sings. In the next part of our journey, we'll listen for those hidden notes, the strange low hums, the quiet pulses, the rhythms of a living planet that might just be harmonizing with worlds we cannot see. Every planet has a voice, though most of us never learn to hear it. The earth hums softly, a constant vibration too low for the ear but strong enough to make oceans move, trees sway, and the air itself quiver. Scientists measure it in waves and numbers, but to feel it is another thing entirely. It's the sound beneath silence, the note the world sings when everything else is still. There are places where this voice becomes audible, not as a roar, but as a low, steady tone that seems to come from nowhere. In the small town of Taos, New Mexico, people have heard it for decades. They call it simply the hum. Some describe it as a faint diesel engine idling in the distance. others as a deep, continuous note that never changes pitch. To some, it is soothing, to others, maddening. Investigators have searched for every possible cause: power lines, ventilation systems, seismic activity. But the source remains elusive. The hum is there, and yet it isn't, vibrating somewhere between the measurable and the mysterious. If you soften the scientific explanation, the hum might be thought of as the Earth's slow heartbeat. Every structure, every patch of ground resonates at its own frequency, just as every person has a unique pulse. When those frequencies align, through wind, vibration or pressure, they can amplify each other, creating tones that travel for miles. It's a kind of acoustic mirage, physics as poetry, the world murmuring to itself in its sleep. This hum isn't limited to Taos. Similar sounds have been reported in Bristol, in Ontario, in Auckland, and along the coasts of California and Scotland. Each version has its own rhythm, but the melody is always the same: long, deep, and patient. Some researchers call it microseismic activity. Others think it may be the resonance of ocean waves striking continental shelves. But even those explanations feel lyrical when spoken aloud. The sea striking the land again and again until the entire planet rings like a distant bell. That's not just geology, that's music. And if the Earth hums, then the sky responds. Floating high above us are signals we can't hear, radio bursts and whispers from the stars. Some arrive in steady patterns, others in brief, brilliant flashes. In 2007, astronomers detected the first of what are now called fast radio bursts, brief, powerful pulses of energy coming from deep space. They last less than a millisecond, yet carry more power than our sun releases in days. They appear and vanish so quickly that even the largest telescopes catch only fragments of their song. At first, no one knew what to make of them. Were they collisions of stars? Rotating, magnetized remnants called pulsars? Or something stranger? Transmissions from civilizations beyond our own? The theories multiplied like echoes. Today, most scientists agree that these bursts are natural, the byproducts of cosmic motion and magnetic chaos. But still, every so often, one arrives that doesn't fit the pattern. It's like hearing a familiar melody interrupted by a single, deliberate note that doesn't belong. A pause too intentional to ignore. To translate the science softly, these bursts are ripples in the electromagnetic field, a kind of light stretched until it hums. Light and sound are cousins after all, both are waves that carry information. One moves through air, the other through the void. When you listen to recordings of those cosmic bursts, converted into audible frequencies, they sound like knocks at a door, tiny reminders that even the universe has rhythm. Not all our mysterious signals come from the stars. Some orbit above us, persistent and silent. One of the oldest mysteries of space exploration is the so-called Black Knight satellite. It was first detected decades ago, an unidentified object circling the Earth in a path that didn't match any known spacecraft. Photographs and radar readings fed speculation. Was it debris or a probe from another intelligence? In the end, official explanation suggested a discarded piece of equipment, a tangle of metal left behind by our own missions. Yet the myth remains because it satisfies a deeper instinct, the desire to believe that we are not the only ones listening. If you soften all these stories, from the hum of Taos to the pulses of deep space, they form a single melody, a conversation between worlds. The Earth vibrates, the oceans answer, the stars reply with their own flashes of light. Science gives us measurements, hertz, decibels, wavelengths. But the heart hears something else. It hears harmony. Perhaps the universe doesn't speak in language at all. Maybe it sings, and existence is simply the act of keeping time with that music. Every atom oscillates, every orbit is a rhythm. The gravitational pull that keeps planets dancing around stars can be imagined as a kind of cosmic percussion, the baseline to which galaxies spin. If we could translate the equations into sound, they might resemble the deep resonance of a cello, slow, steady, eternal. Even we participate in that song. The average heartbeat rests around 70 beats per minute, a tempo that echoes the frequency of ocean waves reaching shore. The electrical patterns of our brains pulse in the same range as the natural resonances of the Earth's atmosphere. We are literally tuned to the planet. When you stand barefoot on the ground, you're not just touching the soil, you're closing an electrical loop with the rest of creation. You become an instrument in a symphony you didn't know you were playing in. The philosopher Pythagoras once described the music of the spheres, the idea that celestial bodies emit tones according to their motion. Today we might smile at the metaphor, but in essence he wasn't wrong. Planets and stars do vibrate. Their movements create waves that can be translated into sound. When astronomers convert those vibrations into audible form, the result is haunting. A low chorus of hums and whistles that seem almost alive. It's the same voice the ancients sensed when they built temples aligned to the stars. Maybe this is what connects every hum and every whisper we've ever detected. They're not random noise, they're the background harmony of existence. The Tau's hum, the Black Knight's orbit, the radio bursts, the flicker of magnetic fields, all of it might be the universe tuning itself. The scientist calls it resonance, the poet calls it belonging. And both are right. If you find yourself awake late at night when the world is quiet and even the insects have gone still, listen closely. You may hear a faint vibration in the air, or feel it in the soles of your feet, the slow rhythm of a planet that never stops singing. It doesn't ask to be understood, it only asks to be noticed. And if you follow that vibration deeper, you begin to realize something humbling. The Earth's song isn't a prelude to another world, it is the world. The sound of life itself, layered and overlapping, connecting everything that has ever existed. Which means that even when you think you're alone, you're surrounded by music older than memory, softer than silence, and patient enough to outlast all our questions. As we drift along this melody, the landscape around us begins to change again. The strange colours and sounds fade, giving way to places where reality itself seems uncertain, where the world looks borrowed from elsewhere. Our next stop will take us to those places where nature paints with impossible colours and the planet seems to remember its other lives. There are corners of our planet that seem to have been borrowed from somewhere else, as though Earth herself had once peeked into other worlds and quietly copied what she saw. When you stand in those places, you feel the same sensation you get in a dream that's too vivid, the faint unease of beauty that shouldn't quite exist, like behaving like it has forgotten the rules. These landscapes don't feel alien, they feel remembered, as if they were parts of some earlier imagination, brought into being before the world settled on its usual shapes. One such place is the island of Socotra, adrift in the Arabian Sea off the coast of Yemen. From the air, it looks like a fragment of another planet that drifted too close and got caught in Earth's gravity. The trees here defy logic. The most famous, called the Dragon's Blood Tree, has a thick trunk that rises straight up and then bursts into a flat canopy of branches shaped like an open umbrella. It's a strange geometry, more coral reef than forest. When wounded, the tree bleeds a dark red resin that hardens like glass, used for centuries as medicine and dye. The air smells faintly of spice and salt. The ground glows with pale limestone. Nothing moves quickly, not even the wind. Standing among these ancient trees, you might feel that the island is suspended slightly out of time. Some botanists describe Socotra as the most alien place on Earth, but maybe it's more accurate to say that it's one of the few places still fluent in the planet's original language. Far away, in Australia, Another anomaly of colour gleams between sand dunes, the perfectly pink water of Lake Hillier. Its hue doesn't fade or change, it stays bright even when bottled, as if the water refuses to forget its own dream. Scientists have traced the colour to tiny microorganisms that produce a red pigment to shield themselves from sunlight. Translated softly, it means that the lake's blush is its form of self-protection, a shimmer born of endurance. Seen from above, the pink lake rests beside the deep blue ocean, separated by a thin strip of sand like a border between two realities. It's a reminder that even colour can be defiance, that nature sometimes invents new shades simply to see how far the spectrum will stretch. Then there's the Danakil Depression in Ethiopia, a place so vivid that it feels like walking inside the Earth's imagination. It lies at the meeting point of three tectonic plates, a wound where the planet's crust is being slowly pulled apart. The ground hisses with steam, pools of turquoise water bubble amid fields of sulphur yellow, and rivers of salt wind through mounds of neon orange. The air tastes of minerals and heat, sharp as metal on the tongue. Temperatures here often reach the highest recorded on Earth, and yet life persists. Bacteria that thrive in acid, creatures invisible to the naked eye, carrying on in conditions that would dissolve almost anything else. Geologists call it an example of extreme environment, but if you translate that phrase gently, it means a place where life insists on existing anyway. These landscapes seem impossible, yet they are born from the most ordinary forces: pressure, chemistry, light. The same laws that govern your heartbeat shape these alien vistas. What makes them feel supernatural is not what they are, but how they reveal themselves. We're used to seeing the world in familiar tones: green for living things, blue for distance, brown for Earth. When the planet suddenly shows us pink water or red sap or mountains striped like fabric, we realise how narrow our expectations have been. Science gives us the explanations, but the experience still feels like trespassing into the imagination of something larger. Maybe that's what beauty is, a moment when comprehension stops and wonder takes over. We can describe the cause, but we can't reproduce the feeling. You can list the minerals that colour the hills, or the microbes that tint the lake, but you can't write an equation for awe. The numbers explain the structure. They don't account for the silence that follows when you stand in front of it. In a way, these strange places are like the Earth's memories of our own beginnings. Long before humans appeared, the planet experimented with colour and shape, boiling oceans and volcanic skies, surfaces that shimmered like molten glass. Every alien-looking valley and luminous pool is a small echo of that ancient restlessness. Perhaps what we call bizarre or otherworldly is simply the planet remembering what it used to be: wild, unfinished, fearless. And yet, despite their unearthly beauty, these places are fragile. The salt flats, the coloured hills, the glowing lakes, they depend on delicate balances of heat, wind, and time. Change the temperature and the colour fades, drain the water and the reflection vanishes. In that sense, they are like dreams, easy to disturb, hard to restore. Protecting them isn't just about conservation, it's about preserving the planet's imagination. These are the places where Earth still plays, still invents. If we listen quietly to what they tell us, the message is gentle. The world doesn't need another realm to astonish us. It only needs our attention. Maybe the reason some landscapes look alien is that we've forgotten how to see. When you stand in a place like Socotra or Hillier or Danakil, your senses widen. You notice how light carries colour differently, how the air hums faintly with minerals, how even silence feels charged. The universe doesn't end at the stars, it begins right under your feet. Perhaps we call these sights otherworldly, because we sense that our world is already many worlds at once. Each ecosystem, each climate, each breath of wind has its own physics, its own time. The planet doesn't spin as one, it spins as a symphony. These rare places are the soloists, the moments when one instrument steps forward and reminds us of the melody running beneath it all. So when you see pictures of a pink lake or a tree that bleeds red, don't ask first for the scientific report. Ask what it feels like to live on a planet that can still surprise itself. We're quick to search for life beyond Earth, but sometimes the alien we're looking for is already here, rooted in salt and stone. It doesn't speak our language, but it sings. And as that song fades into quiet, we find ourselves turning inward again. For all the landscapes that seem to belong to other worlds, the most mysterious reflection is still our own. What does it mean to live in a universe that mirrors itself through us? To see another self in the window, or in a dream, or in the eyes of someone who could almost be you. From here, our journey begins to trace that final echo, the human mirror, the doubled self, the whispers of identity across the thin fabric of existence. There's a certain kind of stillness that only exists when you're alone in front of a mirror. The air changes, the room grows quieter than it should be. You stand there, watching your own face, and for a moment, it feels as if you're meeting someone else, someone who knows all your expressions before you do. You blink, they blink, you tilt your head, they follow. But then, in the tiniest flicker of perception, it happens. The reflection seems to move first. A trick of light maybe, a heartbeat's delay in your brain's processing, or something more ancient, a reminder that the mirror has always been more than glass. For as long as mirrors have existed, people have feared and adored them. Ancient myths told of reflections that trapped souls or showed glimpses of other worlds. In Greek legend, Perseus used a polished shield to confront Medusa without turning to stone. In that story, reflection becomes protection, a way of facing the impossible without looking straight at it. In Japan, mirrors were sacred objects said to contain divine light, and in folklore from every corner of the world, breaking one meant disturbing the boundary between realms. Today, mirrors are everywhere, on walls, in pockets, on screens, but they still carry that quiet strangeness. Psychologists call it the mirror stage, the moment in infancy when a child recognizes their reflection as me. It's the birth of self-awareness, but also the birth of distance, the beginning of knowing that you are something separate from the world. Perhaps that's why reflections can still unsettle us. They remind us that identity is both solid and fragile, something seen and something guessed. There's a word in neurology for the experience of seeing oneself as if from the outside, autoscopy. It can happen during extreme fatigue, near-death experiences, or disruptions in the brain's temporal parietal junction, a small region that helps knit together sight, balance, and the sense of I am here. When that coordination slips, the mind can accidentally project its own image outward, creating a double that seems to move independently. Translated softly, it means the brain can cast a shadow of itself, a flickering echo made of perception rather than matter. People who have experienced autoscopy often describe it not with fear, but with wonder. They say it feels like standing beside themselves, watching their body breathe while their mind hovers nearby. It's as if awareness briefly steps out to look back. Science explains it as misfired signals between sensory maps. Poetry might call it a meeting between soul and shell. Both are attempts to describe something that language only half catches. Outside the clinic, the stories multiply. On late-night forums and whispered Reddit threads, people share moments that sound like echoes of an ancient superstition. I saw myself at the grocery store, one post begins, but I was wearing different clothes. Another describes walking past a cafe window and spotting someone identical sitting inside, sipping coffee at the same angle, but turning away just before their eyes could meet. Most readers shrug them off as coincidences or tricks of memory, but the tone in those posts is never fearful. It's tender, like someone trying to remember a dream that might have been real. Psychologists suggest that such experiences may come from pattern recognition gone awry, the mind's incredible ability to find faces even in randomness. Yet that doesn't make them meaningless. To see yourself where you shouldn't be is to glimpse how delicate perception really is, how easily the mind folds the world into stories. It's not madness, it's humanity catching itself in the act of imagining. There's an experiment from neuroscience that illustrates this softly. If you stare at your reflection for several minutes in dim light, tiny distortions begin to appear. The features shift. The symmetry wavers. Some people see their face morph into that of a relative or a stranger. The brain, deprived of stable cues, begins to edit and re-edit what it sees, filling gaps with memory and imagination. The effect feels uncanny, not because the face changes, but because it reminds you that the act of seeing is not passive. You're not just looking at the mirror, you're constructing it, moment by moment. Maybe that's why mirrors have always been thresholds in stories. In fairy tales they speak, in gothic fiction they open, in dreams they often lead somewhere. Psychologists would say that's because the mirror is a perfect symbol of duality, self and other, consciousness and reflection, life and memory. But perhaps at a gentler level, mirrors are simply metaphors for awareness itself, surfaces where light returns home. And there's a quiet truth hiding underneath all the folklore and science. We've built a world made of mirrors. Every screen, every lens, every photograph is a reflection, an image captured and returned. We live surrounded by our own echoes. Maybe that's why the idea of a doppelganger, a second self, feels less like fantasy now and more like ordinary life. We see versions of ourselves filtered, reversed, paused, and replayed so often that the line between image and identity grows porous. But not all reflections are visual. Sometimes the doppelganger lives in the choices we didn't make, the versions of us that stayed behind in other possibilities. The job not taken, the letter never sent, the person we might have become if we'd turned left instead of right. Those invisible selves follow quietly beside us, walking in parallel, reminding us that our lives are always wider than the one we're living. Perhaps that's what all the mirror stories are trying to tell us, that the self isn't singular, it's a conversation between what is seen and what is felt, between the person we show the world and the one who watches from behind the glass. And maybe that's why the reflection sometimes seems to move first, because part of us already knows where we're going. If you ever catch that flicker in the corner of your eye, that instant when your reflection feels almost alive, don't look away too quickly. Maybe it's not a ghost or a glitch. Maybe it's just your awareness waving back, reminding you that consciousness is a two-way mirror, the world looking at itself through you. As the mirror fades behind us, our path now leads toward another kind of doubling, not in glass but in blood and memory. Stories of twins who remember lives they never lived, of minds that seem to stretch beyond a single lifetime. The next chapter of our journey will follow those echoes, where memory, identity, and possibility intertwine as softly as dreams. There's a story that begins, as many mysteries do, in a small, quiet town. In 1957 in Hexham, England, a pair of twin girls were born, Jennifer and Gillian Pollock. To anyone meeting them, they were ordinary children, curious and lively. But to their parents, John and Florence, they seemed to carry something impossible, the memories of two other daughters, Joanna and Jacqueline, who had died in a tragic car accident the year before the twins were born. From the beginning, small details whispered of something uncanny. The twins asked for toys that had belonged to their sisters, ones they had never seen. They knew the names of streets near the old family home, though they had moved long before the twins' birth. Once, walking past a school, the girls pointed and said, "That's where we used to go." When Florence noticed that Jennifer had a birthmark on her hip and another on her forehead, matching scars that Jacqueline had once had, her breath caught. For years, the Pollock family tried to make sense of what was happening. Were these coincidences, echoes of stories the children might have overheard? Or were the girls somehow carrying fragments of lives that had already ended? John believed it was proof of reincarnation. Florence wanted to believe, but she feared what that might mean, that the soul, instead of resting, loops endlessly, searching for itself again. As the twins grew older, the memories faded. By age 7, the girls no longer spoke of their other lives. They became simply Jennifer and Gillian again, bright, healthy, full of laughter. But the story remains one of the most famous and carefully documented cases of apparent reincarnation in modern history. Even today, psychologists and parapsychologists still study it, not to prove or disprove, but to understand how memory, identity, and love might be more fluid than we imagine. If we translate the idea softly, reincarnation doesn't have to mean that an entire self leaps intact from one life to another. It could mean that consciousness, whatever it truly is, moves like light through glass, refracting, scattering, appearing in new shapes, but always carrying the same warmth. The Pollock twins' story might be less about the return of souls and more about the persistence of connection, the way patterns of affection, memory, and energy echo through time. Science offers its own metaphors for continuity. Some physicists talk about quantum immortality, a thought experiment suggesting that consciousness never truly experiences its own end. In the simplest terms, it means that in the grand web of possibilities, there's always at least one thread where you continue, where you wake up again, somewhere, somehow. Not as a miracle, but as a mathematical inevitability. The numbers are abstract, but the feeling behind them is deeply human. The belief that awareness never really blinks out, it just shifts its gaze. If that sounds far-fetched, think of dreams. Every night your mind builds entire worlds from nothing. Landscapes, people, histories, all complete and believable, at least until you wake. Consciousness clearly has no trouble creating reality. Perhaps the universe simply does the same on a grander scale. In that sense, the Pollock twins' memories might be like leftover dreams, a resonance between two worlds, where one identity passes its melody to another. Stories like theirs are not unique. Across cultures, children sometimes recall names, places, or families they've never met, later confirmed by records or witnesses. In India, Tibet, Lebanon, and parts of Africa, reincarnation is treated not as a miracle, but as a continuation, a natural recycling of spirit. The boundaries of yes are not rigid walls, but doorways. In psychology, there's another way to frame this. The human mind is an archive of impressions, smells, colours, voices that can lie dormant for years before surfacing in unexpected ways. Genetic memory, though not mystical, offers its own poetry. Instincts and preferences inherited so deeply they feel like personal experience. A child's fear of the sea might echo an ancestor's shipwreck. A fascination with music could be an echo of hands that once played a long-forgotten instrument. The body itself carries a history beyond its birth. Perhaps that's what the Pollock story really reminds us of, that the line between memory and identity is porous. We are each a collage of everything that came before, our parents' laughter, our culture's songs, the world's shared griefs. In that sense, reincarnation happens every day, not as souls swapping places, but as compassion and memory passing quietly forward. You've probably felt it in small ways. When you meet someone for the first time and feel you've known them forever, when a place you've never visited feels like home, or when you dream of a life that feels as real as this one, and for a few waking moments, you can't decide which is which. Maybe these are tiny echoes of the same pattern, a consciousness that refuses to stay confined to a single narrative. Quantum theories may describe the universe as a field of probabilities, each event unfolding across countless possibilities. Translated softly, that means existence doesn't end, it rearranges. When one path closes, another opens, and awareness continues down whichever one. Still sings, Pollock twins' story becomes then a tender metaphor. Perhaps consciousness, like light, always finds another surface to illuminate. Whether or not reincarnation is literal, the feeling behind it carries truth. Love does not vanish. Experience does not disappear. Every act of kindness ripples through generations in ways we can't measure. Even memories we never lived can shape us. Through stories, through music, through the quiet inheritance of empathy. The universe may recycle energy, but maybe it recycles meaning too. As we drift deeper into these reflections, notice how they circle back to a familiar question. Who are we, really, when so many versions of us seem to exist? The child who remembers another life, the adult who dreams of another self, the consciousness that feels older than its years, all are different faces of the same mystery. Perhaps identity, like the multiverse itself, isn't a fixed point but a constellation, each star shining with a memory of where it came from. And so, we move gently from the extraordinary back toward the ordinary, the small everyday moments when the edges of time and self blur just enough for us to notice. Déjà vu. The misplaced key, the repeated phrase, the feeling that something has already happened, though you know it hasn't. Maybe these are the soft footprints of all our possible selves, crossing paths for an instant before continuing on their separate ways. You've had that moment before, the one where time folds softly in on itself. You're standing in a doorway, maybe halfway through a sentence, when a sudden certainty washes over you. I've been here before. The colours, the sound of someone's voice, even the angle of light, they all feel uncannily familiar, like a memory sneaking back from a dream you can't quite name. Then, just as quickly, it fades, leaving only the faint echo of wonder behind. Science calls it déjà vu, from the French for already seen. It happens to almost everyone at some point, though no one experiences it quite the same way. For some, it's a pleasant flutter, a small curiosity. For others, it's a disorienting jolt like slipping between frames of a film. But whatever form it takes, it always feels like a reminder, a message from somewhere or someone, nudging us with a quiet whisper. You've been here before. The simplest explanation is that déjà vu is a small timing error in the brain. Normally, when you see or hear something new, it travels through a system that decides whether it's fresh information or a stored memory. Occasionally, that system fires twice. The signal meant for present is misfiled as past, and for a second, you feel as though you're remembering the very moment you're still living. To translate that softly, your mind accidentally tells you that now is a memory, and for one beautiful, impossible instant, you experience both the moment and its echo together. That perhaps is what makes déjà vu so strangely comforting. It feels like proof that time isn't a single direction. It loops and overlaps like threads in fabric. When you tug on one, another trembles. It might only be an illusion, but illusions often carry truth in disguise. Writers have called it time's hiccup, memory's shiver, and a rehearsal already performed. Some scientists suggest that déjà vu occurs when our brain recognizes a pattern, an arrangement of space or sound that resembles something we've encountered before but can't consciously recall. It's like catching the scent of a memory that hasn't yet been remembered. The recognition happens below the surface, and by the time your mind tries to name it, the feeling is gone. There's another version of this phenomenon called déjà rêvé, already dreamed. In those moments, a situation feels like a dream you once had, not a place you've been. You might walk into a new house and know where the next room is before you see it, or meet a stranger whose name you somehow already know. Science can trace this too. Neurons in the hippocampus, the brain's memory hub, occasionally misfire, blending dream imagery with waking reality. But if we step away from the medical language for a moment, what we're left with is far more poetic. The sense that our dreams are rehearsals for lives we haven't yet lived. Maybe déjà vu is a kind of crossroads, a point where your many possible selves briefly line up, each walking the same path in unison. For an instant, you sense the overlap, the synchronization of countless versions of you. Then, as quickly as they appear, the others fade, and you continue alone, though perhaps a little less alone than before. There's a quiet metaphor in that. If we imagine every choice as a doorway, then déjà vu might be the moment when two of those doorways open at once, and the wind from one brushes through the other. The feeling isn't just familiarity, it's recognition. You're not remembering the past, you're remembering the rhythm of existence itself. Some philosophers have wondered if déjà vu could be the mind's way of checking in with its alternate selves, small signals across timelines, like echoes bouncing down a long hallway of mirrors. The physics of it, when softened into imagery, would sound something like this. If the universe truly contains countless branches of possibility, each moment is a split in the fabric of reality, like the branching of a tree. Most of the time, those branches never touch again, but sometimes a breeze passes through them and the leaves brush together. That brush of contact, the soft vibration of coincidence, is what we feel as déjà vu. Others approach it more simply. They say déjà vu is the reminder that memory and imagination use the same canvas. The same neurons that recall the past also paint the future, and sometimes they reach for the same colour twice. When you feel déjà vu, you're catching your own mind at work, blending what was and what might be until they blur. There's a certain tenderness in this idea. It means that déjà vu, like a dream, doesn't need to be explained to be meaningful. It's an experience of overlap, a reassurance that your life is connected to itself in ways you can't see. It's a momentary glimpse of your own continuity. If we look closely, déjà vu isn't alone. It has siblings: déjà entendu, already heard, déjà senti, already felt, and even presque vu, almost seen. All are variations on the same theme, the sense that experience is not linear but circular, that everything returns in some form. The mind, it seems, is less a clock than a kaleidoscope, rearranging pieces of reality into patterns that repeat and shimmer. You might notice it in small ways, the same conversation repeating years apart, as if time wanted to remind you what you once said. The same melody finding you in a different city. The same sentence you wrote as a child appearing again in your adult handwriting. These repetitions aren't meaningless. They're the rhythm of the self, the heartbeat of your own unfolding story. Perhaps when you feel déjà vu, you're not glimpsing another timeline at all, but the pattern of your own existence, the rhyme in your life's poem revealing itself for a brief moment. The universe, after all, loves repetition. Electrons circle endlessly, seasons return, even galaxies spin in spirals that echo one another. Why should consciousness be any different? So the next time that soft familiarity washes over you, don't rush to shake it off. Let it linger. Smile at it. Imagine it as a small wave from one of your other selves, passing by on a nearby current. It's not a warning or a glitch. It's a greeting, a reminder that you are part of something continuous, repeating and quietly infinite. As the feeling fades, it leaves behind a calm curiosity. If reality can echo within itself, then perhaps we too are echoes, reflections of reflections, moving through the same melody in countless variations. And if that's true, then maybe every version of us, in every timeline, is united by one quiet wish: to understand, to love, and to leave the world a little gentler than we found it. And so, with that thought resting softly in the air, we turn now to the question that has been waiting all along. If there are so many versions of us, which one is the real story? Which self gets to speak for the rest? In the next part of our journey, we'll listen for the answer that only stillness can give, the understanding that truth may not be singular at all, but harmonic, a chord struck across the universe, with every you playing a note in the same endless song. Imagine meeting yourself, not in a dream, not in a mirror, but face to face. The same voice, the same hands, the same flicker of thought behind the eyes. Would you recognize them as you? Would they? And if they spoke first, saying something you didn't expect, would you argue or listen? It's an impossible meeting that philosophers and storytellers have been playing with for centuries. The German poet Heine called the doppelganger a man's own shadow come to visit. In modern physics, we might call it an encounter between branches of possibility, two versions of the same life, separated by choices and chance, brushing together for a moment before drifting apart again. But however we describe it, the question remains, what happens when the self becomes plural? Let's begin gently, not with theories, but with a conversation. Picture yourself sitting across from your double in a quiet cafe. The air smells of coffee and rain. The other you looks tired but kind. For a while, you just watch each other, marvelling at the symmetry of it all, the small scar on the same hand, the same habit of tapping the cup twice before drinking. Then they speak. "Do you ever feel," your double says, "that we're both improvising the same song in different keys?" You laugh, because somehow that makes sense. Maybe that's all identity is, a melody played with tiny variations. The philosopher William James once wrote that consciousness is a stream, always flowing, never the same water twice. If we stretch that image, each version of us in every universe is a tributary, a smaller stream carrying the same current in its own direction. The self is not one person, but a river system of possibility. In physics, there's a thought experiment known as the many worlds interpretation. It suggests that every quantum event, every tiny coin flip of probability, creates two outcomes, both real, both unfolding in parallel. When we translate that softly, it means that every choice might bloom into a separate story, not erased but lived elsewhere. Somewhere, another you turned left instead of right, spoke instead of staying quiet, stayed instead of leaving. You are the echo of that self, and they are yours. But who then is the real one? It's tempting to say this you is the true version, the one whose choices you can feel under your fingertips. Yet even in this life, identity isn't fixed. You're not the same person you were 10 years ago. Your cells have changed, your beliefs softened, your memories edited by time. The boundaries of self are porous. You've already been many people within one lifetime. Maybe the multiverse simply magnifies that truth. Suppose your double leaned forward and said, "I made different mistakes, but they taught me the same lessons." Would you believe them? You might, because beneath every divergence, there's still a shared rhythm, the same heartbeat playing through separate songs. In one version of reality, perhaps you're the cautious one, keeping the peace. In another, the bold one, leaping first and apologizing later. But neither of you is wrong. Both are experiments in being. You are the universe's way of testing its own melody in different octaves. Philosophers once called this the ship of Theseus problem. If every part of a ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? The answer, when whispered gently, is yes and no. The ship is a pattern more than a thing, continuity born from change. So are we. Your double is not a copy, but a continuation of a pattern that began long before either of you noticed. Maybe that's why dreams often feel like visits from other selves. You wake up remembering something you said or did that doesn't fit your life, but fits a life, a version of you who chose differently. The line between imagination and memory is thin because both belong to the same current. In one sense, your double has always been here, living quietly in your possibilities. If you ask them what their world is like, they might smile and say, "Not so different. The air tastes the same. The moon still rises where it should." And yet, they might tell you that small things diverged. One friendship that never began. One moment of courage that came too late. The universes that separate you are not built from distance, but from decisions. And perhaps the reason such a meeting feels profound is that it mirrors something we already do. We talk to ourselves all the time. We replay conversations, imagine what we could have said, comfort the past, negotiate with the future. In that inner dialogue, your other selves are already present. The mind is a hall of echoes, each voice belonging to a slightly different version of you. Some wiser, some gentler, some still afraid. But all of them are trying to understand the same thing: how to live meaningfully in a universe that never stops multiplying. If the universe is truly infinite, then it holds every possible version of you, every mistake made and unmade, every dream realized and forgotten. But infinity doesn't have to feel overwhelming. You can think of it instead as compassion made cosmic. Every you, everywhere, learning in its own way what it means to be conscious, to care, to hope. The lesson is shared, the melody collective. And maybe that's the quiet purpose of this idea. Not to make us feel small, but to make us feel connected. You're not a single note trying to fill the silence. You're part of a chord so vast it can only be heard through wonder. If you could step outside yourself for a moment, if you could look at all your versions, every joy and regret stretched across universes, you might see that together they form something whole, something beautiful. So, if your double ever sits across from you in that imagined cafe and you ask them, do you think all this, every world, every version, means anything? They might take a slow sip, smile and answer, it means we exist, and that's enough. The path from here grows quieter, narrowing towards stillness. All the theories and stories, the mirrors and echoes begin to settle like dust after a long conversation. What remains is peace, the realization that every possibility, every reflection, every double leads back to the same place, awareness itself. From that calm, our final journey begins, not into another world, but into the space between them. A pause, a breath, the quiet between universes, where meaning doesn't need words and curiosity can finally rest. Imagine standing in a vast open field at night. The air is still, the stars faintly shimmer, and somewhere in the grass, a cricket keeps time. There's no border between sky and earth, only a gradient of blue dissolving into darkness. You take a slow breath, and for a moment, it feels as if everything, your thoughts, your heartbeat, the trembling of the leaves, is moving in the same rhythm. That rhythm is where we began, and where all journeys eventually return, the quiet between universes. After travelling through theories and myths, stories and reflections, this silence feels different now. It isn't the absence of sound or motion, it's the presence of everything at once. If the multiverse exists, perhaps this quiet is the thread holding it together, the soft hum that runs beneath every version of reality. Not a place, but a pause. Not a void, but a breath between worlds. Physicists sometimes describe space itself as a field, a vast ocean of energy where particles flicker in and out of being. Translated softly, it means reality is less solid than it seems. Everything that exists is vibration, a continuous dance of appearing and vanishing. Even you, standing in that quiet field, are part of that motion. You're a ripple in the same invisible sea. When we think of infinite worlds, we imagine distance, galaxies stacked beside galaxies, universes separated by light years or barriers of physics. But maybe the real separation is subtler, closer than air. Perhaps every universe is layered like sheets of glass, all touching, all transparent, and every so often a reflection passes through. That reflection could be a déjà vu, a dream, a memory that doesn't belong. Or maybe it's this moment right now, listening, breathing, feeling yourself held in the quiet. If we translate that into the language of the heart, it means we are never truly apart. Every version of you that has ever existed, every decision, every life, every universe is contained here, in this single stillness. You're not scattered across infinities. You're the infinity itself, folded gently into awareness. Look around, even in your own small room. The light on the wall, the hum of the electricity, the faint pulse in your wrist. All of it is connected by something unseen. The same laws of physics guide the stars and the heartbeat. The same particles that began their journey in the first fire of creation still flow through you now. The universe isn't out there, it's in here, alive in every cell, every breath. We often imagine discovery as expansion, going farther, seeing more, but perhaps the truest discovery is contraction, realizing how much of the cosmos already lives within. The multiverse might not be a collection of separate worlds at all. It could be layers of perception, infinite perspectives folded into one consciousness. When we look inward, we glimpse outward. When we love another, we touch another version of the same life wearing a different face. Maybe that's what the scientists, the mystics, and the storytellers have all been trying to describe from different directions. That existence itself is relational, that every atom and idea echoes something else. The equations call it symmetry, the poets call it harmony, and we, somewhere between them, might simply call it peace. Think of it this way: if the universe truly contains every possibility, then somewhere there's a version of you who has already found the calm you've been searching for. Another who learned to forgive. Another who finally let go of what couldn't be changed. Those versions don't vanish when you can't see them. They hum quietly, like distant stars behind the clouds. And when you breathe deeply enough, when you allow stillness to expand inside you, you can almost feel their warmth reaching across the invisible distance, whispering, "It's all right. We made it." The physicist Erwin Schrödinger once suggested that consciousness might be singular, that the sense of I in every being is a single awareness, looking through many windows. If we translate that softly, it means that perhaps there aren't many observers scattered across realities at all. There is one great observer, infinite in shape and memory, experiencing itself in countless ways. You are not one among billions, you are billions exploring the one. This is the quiet between universes, not a cold emptiness, but a shared awareness that connects everything that has ever been. It's the pause between heartbeats, the silence between words, the space in which thought dissolves into understanding. And maybe, after all the wondering and wandering, that's what the multiverse has been teaching us. Not that reality is divided, but that it's whole beyond measure. That every mirror, every echo, every dream, every possible version of you is part of one unbroken field of being. If you close your eyes now, you can almost feel it. The gentle pulse that runs through everything, the faint vibration that never stops. It's the same rhythm the earth hums beneath its oceans, the same beat in the wings of galaxies, the same breath moving through you now. To feel it is to realize that you've never been outside the universe's story. You've always been its voice. So, as the night deepens and the stars drift quietly overhead, you can let the questions rest. You don't need to solve the multiverse. You are living proof of it. Each thought a world, each heartbeat a cosmos, each dream a doorway. And in this still moment, as you listen to the hush around you, you're standing in the center of all of them. And so, we've reached the end of tonight's exploration. Whether your eyes are still open or you're already floating somewhere between waking and dreaming, thank you for being part of this quiet journey. If you'd like to return for more gentle wanderings through space, time, and wonder, you're always welcome here. Until then, rest well. Let the universe hum softly through your breathing and sleep peacefully wherever and whenever you may be.